My guess is that no matter how together most of you may be most of the time, that each one of you probably spends a little bit of time in the wilderness. I know I do. And the Bible got me going again. You know, Jesus, it's ironic, we had a baptism yesterday and two today, and the gospel is about the baptism of Jesus. And as soon as Jesus is baptized, he goes into the wilderness for 40 days, and there he is tempted. Tempted to be somebody he's not, tempted to turn his loyalty over to Satan, tempted to think that maybe he's not the chosen one of God. And I'm thinking, yesterday I had a baptism here. It's a Saturday baptism, and 80 people show up. And I saw little Madison, and I do, Madison, I baptize you in the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Spirit. I asked the godparents if they promised to stand by her for the rest of her life, and the parents too. And then, of course, we have the two little babies today. And God only knows where Michael's and Pauline's paths are going to go. But you know, and they may spend some time in the wilderness, but the reason we celebrate baptism is because there's going to be a family and a whole bunch of people behind them. Because at this stage in their life, they can't do it by themselves. They're innocent, and they're trusting, and they're naive, and they're placed in the hands of their families and us to make sure they can get through all this stuff together. And for my baptism yesterday, I go to a funeral of a World War II veteran who volunteered to go to Normandy, fought the Battle of the Bulge. And I was thinking of the veterans that we're going to see this afternoon. And as I shared in his funeral, this proud American World War II veteran, I realized that he chose to serve his country so that goofs like me could go to work every day. If it wasn't for guys like that, I couldn't turn the key to the front door and make the coffee and do all that kind of stuff I just take for granted all the time. And I was thinking about the wilderness, and what does your wilderness look like? Do you ever have those times where you're just tempted to kind of fall off track? Is your wilderness Normandy? Is it the Battle of the Bulge? And as I got the phone call to do this gentleman's funeral, little did I know that a half hour later, without knowing it, his nephew would come by the church, and we'd sit in my office and talk about the Vietnam War and about what it was like to serve for a year in Vietnam and to have some of your comrades not come back, and the way those veterans were treated when they came back, like they didn't matter. Maybe your wilderness is Vietnam. Maybe it's a 12-step program that you go to so that you don't gamble and drink too much. Maybe it's a half-day funeral procession for a gentleman who served his town and his country in blue. Maybe it's a school in Florida where we are reminded that life can be taken away from us in a moment of time. And then I can't get these words out of my mind. I hear the words of one of the fathers who lost their child in Florida. And he said, "Thoughts and prayers are no longer enough." Thoughts and how many times have I told you, my thoughts and prayers are with you? I almost say that without thinking. You tell me somebody's in the hospital, you tell me what you're going through, and I say, my thoughts and prayers are with you. And this guy stands up after losing his child and says, thoughts and prayers are no longer good enough. I cannot get those words out of my head because praying is what we do. Every Sunday we have a long list of people that need our prayers and need our support. And then I think of this passage in the gospel where the sheep and the goats are facing Judgment Day. And it kind of reminds me of one of those funerals that I did 2 weeks ago, where the funeral director calls me and says, "Don, we have a funeral here for a guy who didn't go to church, isn't religious, and didn't believe in God. And of course, Don, we thought of you." And then I go there, and I talk to his wife and his kids and a couple of his friends. And they tell me what he did with his life. All he did was give. He was gentle. He was kind. He was forgiving. He worked hard. And I thought of that Judgment Day picture where Jesus, the sheep are here and the goats are here. And when it's time to open the gates of the kingdom, Jesus opened the gate and he invites the goats in. And they say, Jesus, what are we doing here? And Jesus said, when I was hungry, you fed me. When I was thirsty, you gave me drink. When I was naked, you clothed me. And they go, when did we ever see you hungry or thirsty or naked? And he says, whenever you did that to the least of my children, you were actually doing it to me. Wow. Whenever you do something like that to the least of my children, I don't care what you believe in, I don't care who you are, I don't care what brand of religion you're in, you actually were doing it to me. And he opens the gate, and the goats and the sinners get in. There's hope for you and me. Jesus spent lots of time in the wilderness. He doubted, he was tempted, he wasn't always sure who he was, but somehow he heard a voice. This is my son, my beloved, with whom I am well pleased. I'm sure that yesterday, the family of Sergeant Paul Bauer heard a voice. A funeral procession that took all day to get to the cemetery. All those people paying respect to a man, but not just to a man, but to a way of life, to a spirit of sacrifice and giving. And then I think of those words of all the families that lost those kids in Florida. Somehow, someway, they got to hear a voice. Despite all that they've been through, despite their loss, they've got to know that somehow, some way, there's a higher power that will get them through this tragedy and give them faith for tomorrow. You may wonder what good it does to do anything. But I keep hearing those words, thoughts and prayers are not enough. So what difference is giving one used prom dress going to do when you hang it up in Nickerson Bridge for a kid who can't afford to go to the prom? What about those few pair of gently worn shoes that you put in the basket? Is that going to make a difference? How about that one phone call that you need to make to somebody that you haven't talked to in years? How about the words, I'm sorry, to one person who should be the one to say, I'm sorry first, but you have the guts and the humility to go first? How about that opening the door, or the pat on the back, that unexpected financial donation to somebody who cannot pay their bills on Tuesday or Wednesday? You know, kindness and generosity, it may not change the world, but if your act of kindness and generosity brings one dash of hope to one other person, one day during the week, well, thoughts and prayers may not be enough, but it's the beginning of a journey of giving that can make a difference and may one day change the world. Who knows? There's always hope. Amen. If you're able to, please rise for the creed. It's on page 105.